Well, welcome back. As I said, Nedal's helped me set up. I thought I'd just mention this contraption first of all. This I've made, nobody would not suspect that it's totally homemade from odd bits of waste wood. But this gives me, particularly when I'm working on smaller pieces, a much more comfortable height to work at. And any of you who are thinking of starting carving, one of the first things you've got to really do is get yourself a nice strong platform at a good height so that you're not hunched over all the time. Otherwise 2 or 3 hours of carving and it feels as though you've just been humping sacks of potatoes all day. I'm going to have a look at this little piece of work. This is an otter head that unfortunately we had a little accident in the workshop some time ago, and one of my otter head sticks that a customer rather liked got damaged. So I've found another piece of Burr Beech, and this is rather nice wood with lots of interesting grains and swirls in it, and once it takes a finish and polished it really looks rather magnificent. So I've decided to recreate Oswald the otter for her, and I've been working on it with a lot of the big chisels just to get the rough shape. So now I'm going to be setting it up to this also, sorry I haven't talked about this, a very nice piece of kit. It's a ball vise, so you can move work around without having to strip everything down, and it gives you again a flexibility, and I think when you're working on a piece of wood you want to be able to constantly keep moving it around to see different angles and look at different shapes. This is quite a cheap vise. I mean, some of them come into hundreds of pounds, if not 1,000 or so. For really big heavy work I use a slightly different setup, but this is just really for my small stick handles. It's already been shafted with some steel which will, as it were, set into the top of the stick and make a really good tight connection. It has the bolster put on. That's just a piece of buffalo horn which also needs blending in, so I'll be working on that as well. Strike. I'm going to just show you some techniques. As you can see, this is already pretty well worked, and I'm going to be using some fine knives. Let's start off with something which is called a chip cutter. Now you'll also notice that I'm wearing a Kevlar glove. Now I'm going to be starting some more earnest carving. Any carver will tell you that you will always run the risk of the chisel slipping, however careful you are with your technique of keeping your hands behind the blade, etc. And these are, as I've already said, honed to razor sharpness, and they can leave you with some painful nicks and some very serious cuts. I mean, I've talked to a few carvers who've actually cut tendons and things like that, and that's really got not good use for somebody who uses their hands a lot. So the technique of using these chip cutters often is to just use your thumb to add a little bit extra zoomph on it, and without taking too much wood off, you're just constantly nibbling away little chips. There's one that you might be able to see, hence they're called chip cutters, and it's really just you keep nibbling away at something, and that helps you get the shape that you're looking for, and before you start moving into any detail. Just tighten that up a little bit. So having used the chip cutter, I'll then move into maybe some of the slightly larger knives, where you might use a slightly longer stroke, but still with that technique of just giving yourself a little bit of firmness behind the blade, and you're just cutting into the wood. You try not to cut too deep and too long. Another technique is, if you want to bring something up to detail, you would use this to score a line, and again you see there where the glove is helped, because obviously I'm now having to have my hand or finger in front of the blade, and then you can just cut up to that mark. That line or the score that I've called is called a stop mark, and there you just notice that it just comes away nice and clean. This is same sort of version as the bigger knives, but here you'd use it for really fine detailed work in tiny corners. I'll just swing that round a little bit. Something here which I might like to work at. It's just, as you can see how sharp these knives are, this is a very hard piece of wood, and I must admit my hour or so of honing before we started filming today has paid off. And then you can just use a reverse technique of just bringing in. So you're working away with that. This is another a skew chisel, very nice on bigger pieces of wood. I'll just pick up one that's here. When you just need to really almost use it like a flat chisel, but you need to get into a tight corner and work away like that. You'll notice with this there's a very pronounced grain that's going north to south, and I try and work with the grain when you're carving. On this it's virtually impossible because the grains are going all the way which way. Chisels are chisels. I mean, there's not really very much to talk about a chisel. This is a slight skew. I don't know whether you'll pick that up on the camera, probably not, but it's just like a little tiny thumbnail, and that's very useful for just getting into detail lines like that and just working in there to give a bit of depth. And then the other tool, apart from skews and flat chisels, that's a little V tool, and that cuts a nice line. Let's have a look. The light's giving a bit of shade. Where do we need a line? Well, we can just give a bit of definition here. Just it. You see, this is an exceptionally hard piece of wood, and you can see there it's left a line which I can then tidy up with a knife. It's left a little V trench, and that just helps to give some definition where I want to just bring the side of the face round. So that's it. That's knife work. There's loads of good books, and you can sign yourself up to a carving course at the local colleges and things, but that's just to give you a very brief outline of knife work and some of the smaller chisels I use when making a small item. So the next thing we'll be looking at is the filing, and I'll use Oswald here as our model. So come on, Nerdle, time to press the button, and if you say cut one more time, Nerdle, you're in the sawdust bucket again.